Well, join us this morning to discuss inmates' rights to vote. An unprecedented number of pretrial persons in Nigeria correctional service centers is Dr. Uju Agomoh. She is the Chief Executive Officer, Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, PROA. Good morning, ma'am, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. And good morning, everyone.
Yes, so let's just dive into the conversation. And now I'm looking at this discussion, and I remember that when it comes to the issue of suffrage, as regards persons who are marginalized or vulnerable individuals, there's always a paradigm, there's always a story, there's always an outcry. When it happened for the women, it started with demonstrations and outcry, women should vote, and then there were advocacy, and people actually lost their lives trying to get this done. So I'm thinking in my mind, how did it happen for prisoners for quite some time? They weren't actually recognized. But what was the paradigm that caused this shift, that called for the rulings and then for organizations like yours to press for such changes?
I think fundamentally, whenever you talk about suffrage, it comes to the mind regarding how you perceive that individual who you think ought to have the right to vote. So the same thing happened with the women. So, but with the issue of those who are in places of detention, those who are being incarcerated, so there was this first of all attitude of, by the way, these are people who have committed offenses and should completely take away every rights as part of all the rights they have, because of indicating that this is a reaction to their so-called action. But you and I know that there are people who are in custodial facilities that are innocent. You and I know there are people who cannot even be determined to have committed the offense. Also, in a climate like ours, which has close to 70% and sometimes over 70% of those who have not been determined to have committed the offense. I mean, I guess that's the other issue we're going to discuss about. So, and then of course,
those are waiting trial, right?
Those whose, I always like to describe them as those whose conviction have not been determined, because there are some of them that trials have commenced. Then of course there's some that are trial commenced and are stalled. There are those who are still awaiting trial. So there are about 3 different categories around that. But the most important thing is that they have not been yet convicted. Now, there is also yet the third category, which usually are the category that people think that those are the only ones that are in custody. And this is about those who have committed the offense. But the question around suffrage, your right to vote, connects to the fact that this is something you see as fundamental, but also if truly you want to talk about the person being reintegrated, the chances of them understanding that they are part and parcel of society. So that is really why many countries, and I can give you examples of some country, why many countries have aligned to that element. And you have different countries. You have South Africa, for example, who targeted that they will register about 100,000 prisoners, and the 2019 election, 15,000 prisoners were actually able to participate. We have other, countries even in Africa. We have Ghana that have made some attempts. You have Uganda. You have and Kenya and the rest of them. You have Zambia. Zambia actually talked about the situation where 100% they have registered the inmate about 100 to the registration for election with 100% of those.
With no exceptions.
In terms of the registration. Yes. Okay. Now there are other countries. There are countries like Germany. There are countries like Israel. In Israel, you can have the inmates votes within. There is Canada again. For Germany, there is an exception in the sense that for Germany, what they look at is to say that it's not 100%. So if you have been charged for electoral fraud or treason or any offenses relating to political offense, that's part of the thing that will be taken away from you. Okay. But every other inmate can vote, and thereafter, and many other countries. So it is important to mention that for Nigeria, as you know, with the recent decision of the Supreme Court, it then means that truly the landmark that was achieved earlier in the 2014 decision of the court now can apply to across board. Yeah, but the question here it relates specifically in terms of the logistics and operational issues. But it's also important to note that, especially for the awaiting trial, that's very clear. Perhaps more decisions have to be in the other direction. But the issue about operational and logistic is the key thing, and I believe that this is what the Controller General of Corrections, Sylvester Ndidi Uche MNI, is engaging with the INEC and to see how that works in reality. But let us not also forget there are some issues we should bear in mind, and maybe if you want me to say that now.
Go ahead.
So part of the challenges in terms of when you start thinking about an inmate voting is to determine how is this inmate going to be registered. So will it be the registration as per where this inmate was originally resident of, or should the inmate vote in relation to the locality where that correctional center is situated? Do you get my point? So let me explain. Yeah. Let's say let's for want of a discussion, let's say you are in prison. And before this time, you were living in, say, Lagos, and you happen to be imprisoned, say, in Enugu. So while you are in Enugu, remember we're talking about now you voting while in prison. So in that regard, would the thinking be in terms of you as having lived or having residence in Lagos, or you being located in Enugu? Okay. And in some countries, and I think it is South Africa, they have not allowed the inmates to be engaged in local elections, to participate in local elections. Okay. Perhaps that's also one way to deal with it, to not say, okay, it will only be in terms of general elections. Okay. You get my point. So which governor are you going to vote for? Will you vote for governor of Lagos in the governor of Lagos election, or will you go vote for the governor of Enugu State? Do you get my point? But it is important to discuss this and also discuss what are the modalities. In some countries, they've done postal votes. In some countries, they've done bulletproof buses. In some countries, they have used ballot boxes in the facility, like Israel, and others. But I think it is a good way to go, recognizing the different types of inmates that we find in our custodial centers. I will also stress that while we are thinking about this, we must also think about other persons who are detained in other detention facilities, and they are close to about 18 institutions that can detain people.
What sort of institutions?
Police stations, NDLEA cells, do you get me? And all of the lists, so all of those. So we need to also think, and how can we look at this in a more comprehensive way? But that those in correctional centers tend to stay longer. But I don't want us to lose sight of those who are in other
within the same ecosystem.
In some countries, anywhere it is. Because we need to be able to identify all of the custodial facilities, their locations, and also make sure that we are also having plan to include them in the spirit of inclusivity. Okay? And one other area that is so dear to my heart is about the people who are outside the country. The diaspora voting. We should not forget that, because that is key. So I think we just need to make sure that it's in the mood of leave no one behind. Just think about it. How do we ensure that everyone is included?
Now, talking about diasporans, I don't want us to deviate, but I want you to speak to that also. Now, are they expected to vote in their country of residence and then vote, when it comes to Nigerian elections?
No, they're two different matters. Yes. It's not a business what the country of their residence is doing with the election. Okay. We're talking about Nigerian elections now. And as Nigerians, and if they do so wish, they should be able to participate in the election. Think of it, even in the US, when people, we have military people all over the world. Yes, they collect the votes of those people too. So I think anywhere a Nigerian is, and the person wishes to vote, participate, they should be able to have that possibility without necessarily thinking, they have to come and register in Nigeria and come back, fly back into Nigeria to do that. I think it is a hallmark of the development. And I know in many countries, I have been in meetings, some of my colleagues will say they're going to their embassy. There was a particular day I went in Geneva, By the way, I am a member of the UN subcommittee on prevention of torture, and we're having one of our SPTs meeting, and one of our colleagues just said, please, she needed to run to their permanent mission. I said, what was it? He said she wanted to go and vote.
Wow.
To get, so I think it is important that every Nigerian, wherever they are, can have that opportunity.
Interesting.
And it doesn't matter whether you are in custodial centers or you're in police cell or whatever it is that, but again, as I said, the part of the issue is that the temporariness of those some of these detention facilities. But we just need to think about how to include everyone. That's
Absolutely.
important.
I agree with you. Inclusivity is everything. And I want you to speak to this issue. I know you're a legal practitioner, right? But I want you to explain the political implications of this inclusivity going forward for Nigerian politics.
Okay. I would also speak about the red flag, because it's important that as we're making the processes to include every currently excluded person, that we ensure that we do the right thing. So part of the argument have been that sometimes it can be hijacked. So and therefore some instances being that the people will not be able to vote according to their will because they are in locations where not only constrained, but where fear of intimidation can arise sometimes, and this may also be abused. So there have been instances where that have been part of the argument, and then saying that they may not be in the best position to have the best of choices. So for example, how would they have known enough of who these different aspirants have been, and would they have been opportune to listen or read about the different positions and manifestos of those persons, or witness them during their debates? So some people have argued about it, but I think the point here is to be able to put a process that is foolproof, a process that enables people, and the same happening where everybody's vote should count, and where we must make sure that those threats or suspicion of intimidation does not happen. The other part to look at this is that they've been argued that by having the inmates being able to vote, it will maybe make the policymakers, make the politicians, those who are in office, a little bit more sensitive. As per, let me make sure I put in place good laws that can also help me win the votes of these people. Maybe knowing that there's been a lot over the years that have happened that always have shown us that it seems that we have not looked well enough on that side. We know that increasingly there's not been enough investment in justice sector reform. We know that increasingly correctional facilities have not received adequate funding. We know that even things that we're supposed to celebrate, like the alternative to imprisonment programs, non-custodial measures that every country should be happy about because it will save them money, because it would remove all of the negative issues at imprisonment in court. And yet, we have the law, the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, that the whole of part 2 of it provides, starting from section 37 sub 1, provides for how non-custodial measures can be implemented, including also to some extent some aspects of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act of 2015 and the Administration of Criminal Justice laws of many states. But not enough funding, zero funding, as in zero funding. So if you have a new dimension that is supposed to help improve your administration of criminal justice system, and you have zero funding on it, that becomes problematic. At the just recently concluded MBA general conference, one of the sessions I presented the lead paper was looking at the issue about access to justice, security, and accountability. And the point that I made there, which I will make now, is that there is these three. You cannot live. It's like standing on a tripod. You must understand that you cannot have security when you have not adequately advanced justice sector reforms. As a matter of fact, there is a direct connection between what happens, and let me just put this clearly so that everyone out there will understand the danger that this happens. If you increasingly have disproportionate number of your populace come through the criminal justice pathway, whether undeservedly, maybe because they couldn't pay bribe, or maybe because a big man, a rich man says, I want to deal with you, and before you know it, the say, I will lock you up, and you're looking, the person really gets you to be locked up. What you are doing, or do you find these people staying, or you are abusing the pre-trial detention processes, or you are abusing the so-called bail, bail, everybody, you give very stringent bail condition that automatically means I really want you to be inside there, you're not coming out. Meanwhile, bail is supposed to give it to enable you come out and come to court the next time, So if any average person in the law school, they would tell you 3 basic things. If you find out that this person is not going to interact with the process of investigation, if you know that this person is not going to commit any further crime during the period before the trial, if you know that this person has no reason to run away but will present himself at the next court adjourned date, why not grant him bail in the most liberal terms? Bail is not I'm setting you free. It means stay in your house and be coming until we decide this matter, and then depending on what we've decided, we'll decide what to do with you. So what you have done is that you will save government money, okay? And then also you will give enough time to provide adequate assessment of the situation to know what should be the adequate sentence that the person will have. There's another point beyond the issue of bail.
Okay.
It's also the issue of fines. There are a lot of people, because I keep saying anybody you give a fine, when you say I'm giving you fine and the option that if you don't pay this fine you go to imprisonment, ab initio that person is not someone that is at risk for the society by having them in a community. So I have seen instances where people, because they've not paid 10,000 naira, 10,000, 50,000, 3,000, not 3,000, 30,000, 100,000, and they're kept in custody for 1 year, 6 months, and all that, and yet they feed him. So what I'm saying, what the society is doing by having so much obsession about putting people in custody, what you do is that you expose these innocent people, first offenders, to criminal culture. So when you bring them out, society becomes worse for it in terms of security. So that's the point I wanted to make about the connection between one of the points, access to justice and accountability. So we must know what each of these agencies are doing and make sure that they are not doing the wrong thing.
Interesting. While you spoke, I remember I read up something about fines for inmates. It's a program
that we did,
by PROA. So it means that you have projects that are targeted, meant for certain interventions. Now, you also spoke to the fact that they need to be aware, prisoners need to be aware of who to vote for, and maybe probably the voting process. There has to be a level of awareness so that they are better prepared if eventually, or when eventually, voting commences for the prisoners. Now, is there any project, any targeted project by PROA towards ensuring, that this awareness is taken to the inmates?
There are 2 different issues here.
Okay.
So let me take the one on elections.
Okay.
So what we're doing now is doing exactly what we're doing here, creating awareness and letting the policymakers know that there are safeguards that need to be put in place to make this work well. And speaking out in support of this, because it is not bad to have it, but it will be bad if it is abused. It will, so it is important to ensure that right from the beginning, whilst we're getting things right, we ensure that the right things. So this is a public awareness aspect. There is also the bit about advocacy that happens. But once the law has been passed, certainly the lot has to be done in terms of doing basically 3 things. 1, trying to ensure that all of the persons who are in custody understand the importance of. So the inmates are going to be sensitized. The officers are going to be sensitized to be able to know how to support the mechanism, and the training institutions, so that even new recruits coming in, that goes in after a while, that goes to the training institution, gets to understand. So it becomes more institutionalized. And now the correctional service is currently reviewing their curriculum, training curriculum. So that is also something that can be dealt with in that direction. Okay. Now, the other part to say about this, apart from this bit, the one question about the fine for inmates, this was actually something, and a lot of organizations are providing fines one way or the other. First, I must say that it is a very unsustainable mechanism. It is something that is very dangerous for any state to do, and a lot of states see it as income generating. And as I always remind people, there used to be a former controller of corrections. He later on became elevated to a deputy controller general. His name is Tunde Ladipo. When he was the controller of corrections for Lagos State, someone came and said to him he was going to do a birthday and wanted to, feast the inmates with some meals. He very wisely thought and said, if this inmate eats this food, tomorrow, what's next? So he now told them, this man, there are people who are there for fines, if you can pay some of them. Fast forward, the man was able to support over 150 something or thereabout. And within that period, with other intervention he did, about 200 people were taken out of correctional centers in Lagos. There are 5 correctional centers in Lagos. But the next month,
and fines are basically for civil issues, not for
no. The question, yes, I mean, for example, there are people you are hawking environmental issues and all the rest of them, and you are picked. So, but the point I'm trying to make, the next month, that number increased, the amount of fine increased. So it became
a loop, a feedback loop.
A lot of states are using this as one. Yes, and that's the danger. And the point here being made, I'm sure you already know, that correctional service is now, by virtue of this alteration of the Constitution, 17th of March 2023, is now placed on the concurrent legislative list. Part of the problem that we are having is that the people who are putting a lot of people into custody, I know, is actually the states, because most of those people are there for state offenses, and the state agencies are the ones, most of them, processing them to be put in the facility, and yet the federal is left to do what? Feed. And then when you release again, you bring back. But part of what I have decided to begin to talk about is we need to understand that you are actually shooting yourself on your feet, because you're making your society and your state more vulnerable to crime. Because even if the person have entered there innocent, all he needs to do is to connect with one another, and the person will just say, okay, when I come out, I fix you in. And then you are coming out, and that person is exposed to people who ordinarily he or she would not have been exposed to. So you are breeding criminals by doing that into your state. Okay? So it is something that is bad.
What's the level of advocacy on what you just spoke to now?
I will tell you 2 things again that have done on this. And you know that the Honorable Minister of Interior had mobilized a lot of his friends, got a lot of money, which was over 500 million naira, 500,000 million naira, and paid fine for over 4,000 plus, and gave each of them about 10,000 naira after they paid for transport. The previous minister, that was during that we started the fine for inmates scheme. He also started something. He paid the advert that Prawa did on this fine for inmates was paid by him personally. In the papers, and what we did was we then and indicated the different number of persons per each state as we had it then. But you see, part of the problem here is that once you pay this, because every day people are coming to custody or fine.
Absolutely.
So we need to stop the tap.
Regulatory mechanism.
We need to stop it from the tap. And what we need to do, I think, 3 basic things.
Okay.
1, we need to be able to get the state. I have made a point to let the state know that they can't think they are smart by using this as an income generation. They are making their environment worse off in terms of insecurity, in terms of other things. Okay, so why not ensure that nobody on fine should be put in custody?
What would be the alternative?
The alternative will be, because if there are things you need to pay, we need to make you do something. And I'll give you one example.
Okay.
Community service, which is one of the non-custodial sentences described under Section 37, Sub 1 of the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019. It is also provided for both in the ACJA and ACJL. ACJA is Administration of Criminal Justice Act and Administration of Criminal Justice Laws. For those who don't know, the Act is for the federal, which is actually done by the National Assembly, but the laws are the ones that are done at the State Assembly. So what they will then do is, if, again, let me use you as an example, sorry, and forgive me for that. If, for example, you are owing, I don't know, say they've given you a fine of, say, 100,000, and you don't have the money. Instead of putting you in custodial center, and I can give you an example of what happened just about 2 months ago, how much, with 100,000 naira, we were able, though that this was actually in Brno,
Yeah.
we were able to release 5 inmates. But after they have spent some days and weeks and months in custody, and many of them 6 months, 10,000, 3 months for 10,000, 20,000. Now, what after releasing those persons, but the question is what would have happened? Then I come back to your issue. So instead of putting you there, because if you calculate how much the person would have eaten as per food for that duration, you will see that it have gone beyond that.
Yes.
So I would take you, instead of putting you in any custodial facility, I would tell you, okay, you can pay. I would then give you a job whereby you will not be paid, because that's what community service is. Community service means pay back to the society, and that nobody would pay you for the work, whether it's about cleaning, whether it's about teaching, whatever it is that the courts adjudge you to be given. That is one. Or we have a process whereby when you are working, they will deduct from the source of whatever number of years it takes you. It's better than exposing you to criminal culture. It is also better than having the federal government pay you for food, because the danger of
gives
giving
a better mindset in the individual.
So that's one thing I think we should do. So that's first is the embargo to say never should this happen. Second is to provide opportunities for this individual to still have a way of paying that back. So whether they, because remember the fines is paid to the state, but where there's also another problem is compensation. Some of these inmates who are there on fine are given fine and compensation. For compensation means you pay compensation to the victim. So sometimes they say you are given 6 months, or you pay. You pay 100,000 or 6 months. You say I don't have 100,000. So you stay in custodial center for 6 months. After 6 months they are supposed to release you. You know that. But then they gave you, okay, you're supposed to pay 300,000 naira compensation. So a lot of them, because they have finished the term that is option for their paying the fine, then they don't have the money to pay the victim in terms of the compensation, and they're stuck there again. And the federal government, the government is also feeding on money. So the other suggestion is to have a victims fund, whereby anything that requires to be paid to the victim that you don't find any source, whether it's because you didn't find the person who committed that offense, or the person is unable to do it at that particular time, you sort out the victim from that source, and then still work with this person over time
with the same framework.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it will be a smart thing to do, and that will help reduce the number of persons who are in custody, which I know is another issue that is of interest to you to discuss today, because there's a danger there.
Yes, interestingly, we have run out of time, and I actually wanted you to speak to that, but that will have to happen on another time, another conversation. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Uju Agomoh. You're full of wisdom and full of insights. We'll have you back.
I've been doing this for 30 years.
Oh my.
So,
kudos and God's grace to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Signature TV. News in your pocket.